Hey guys, this is Rocky and I'm back with another video. 2 in 1 night, alright. So this video is just to show a trap in the Scandinavian opening in a particular line, but one that you could easily see. So it's good to know for both sides. I know the Scandinavian Defense is getting pretty popular online just because a lot of people watch John Bartholomew's YouTube channel. I do as well. John's awesome. And he really promotes the Scandinavian Defense for black. I've never really been able to bring myself to play it. I guess I could try messing around with it just to get a better understanding of what black players are trying to do. But yeah, I don't know. It breaks chess principles in the opening, so it's hard for me to really accept it. Although I know it is solid and totally playable and has stood the test of time. So probably I should get over that at some point. But okay, let's take a look and see what we're talking about here with this line. So Scandinavian Defense, and I was playing the knight f3 lines, which are really sharp. And a lot of fun to play. I think I've mentioned this before, but there's a nice video series. It's an older one, but it's still pretty good, by Brian Smith. I think it's available on iChess.net. Used to be onlinechesslessons.net. But right now I'm looking at a video series from Chess24 by GM Lawrence Trent, and he goes over some of these setups. I think it might be the short variation where you get a quick knight on c3, which of course is the main line anyway. And then bishop c4, and then you have some flexibility with the d-pawn where it can either go 2 squares or maybe in some cases it can go 1 square as needed, and you can get some attacking setups this way. So I'm starting to mess with that. So okay, knight c3, and of course here black has some different options. I guess the main line is queen a5, and then there's stuff with like, I think there's even stuff with like queen d6 and maybe queen e6 probably isn't good. And I guess I don't really see the queen going over to the board. I have seen queen e5 too. I have to kind of check and see what to do on some of these moves. I know there's a chessable repertoire that John was talking about on the Scandinavian, so probably there's a lot of good ideas there. Okay, but anyway, there's also this so-called Meises-Kotroc variation, or Lawrence Trent calls it the banker variation. That's the first time I've heard that. And this is really provocative to me. I mean, not only are you breaking a chess principle by bringing the queen out early in the opening, but you're breaking another principle by moving the same piece twice and undeveloping it. Seems like you're sort of doing 3 bad things at once. But having said this, somehow this opening is solid. It's amazing to me. But okay, so what should we do here as white? Lawrence Trent's recommends just developing. I think the main move is d4. But again, sort of maintaining some flexibility with that d-pawn is one of his points. I'm not totally sure, you know, how good it is to have the pawn on d3 in some cases. But yeah, I haven't gotten that far, I guess, in the series. I've watched them, but I don't really remember all the lines. So okay, so these moves are pretty standard, and the reason why I wanted to show this is because. And Lawrence Trent argues this in his video. It says like Scandinavian players a lot of times are going to make their opening moves pretty automatically, especially if they play a particular variation like this. So it's very possible that you can catch them in this trap. And the good thing is that you don't have to play any weird moves as white. You're not playing for the trap. You're just playing good moves, good solid development. And if black falls into the trap, fine. If not, then you still have a good position and a small advantage out of the opening. Okay, so bishop c4, just developing normally, no problem. Bishop f5, trying to get the bishop outside of the pawn chain. This is a problematic piece for black in these openings because ultimately he wants to play e6 and c6 and then have like a strong knight set up on d5. But before he plays e6, he wants to get this bishop out of the pawn chain. So you'll see this. You could also see bishop g4, but I think what Lawrence Trent argues a lot of times is that an early bishop g4, when it's not really supported by much, just runs into h3, which is a useful move for white anyway, kind of deflecting the bishop from this diagonal, potentially bumping the bishop a couple times, and ultimately perhaps trading it for a knight, giving white the bishop pair. So also sometimes white can even castle long, and then his pawns are really far advanced, and you can try to even crowd this bishop sometimes in some lines. I think there's a pretty famous Anand game where that happens. Okay, so yeah, okay, so back to the line here. The fact that this already is running into some uncomfortable play for black So now white is going to break an opening principle and move the same piece twice, but I think there's some justification here because black's already done some funny business himself. So of course here now we're looking at this weak f7 point, and this move is approved by Stockfish. And I looked at my computer analysis on chess.com afterwards, and you always have to kind of keep in mind, like, I think I had like, I don't know, 4 inaccuracies or something, but then I looked at Stockfish, and sometimes the moves, they were just disagreeing with the chess.com computer analysis, because of course Stockfish 7 is going to be a little stronger. So yeah, okay, anyway, or maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe it didn't take enough time to calculate or whatever. I put it on the maximum one. But okay, so we're looking at this tender point, and this again, you're going to probably see these moves. Like, you could very easily see this opening because the Scandinavian players basically have their preference. I think they either play queen a5 or they play queen d8. And so of course they're going to play both at some point, and they probably mess around with both. But I think once they find one that they like better, they're going to play it a lot. So if you get somebody who plays this variation with queen d8, they're going to just play it, and then their next few moves are almost autopilot a lot of times. So they'll play back, you're developing, they get the bishop out. You make a threat here, and the most logical way to block it is just to play e6. I mean, they wanted to play e6 anyway. It solves the problem. It's part of their opening, so they're just probably going to play this. They're not. This isn't a mistake. It's a fine move. It's just that we're getting into some moves where black's already going to have to be careful. So queen f3. Again, white perhaps is taking some liberties here with the development, getting the queen out before castling and before getting his last minor piece out, but this move has some practical points or some concrete points. We've already set up a trap here. So in the game, we actually get to see it. My opponent played c6, and Lawrence Trent mentions this in his video series, that you're going to get Scandi players who will, if they play this variation, they might make this move just on autopilot, and it's already a mistake, probably just a losing move. Because of the variations that are to come up here. If you want to put your video on pause and see what they are, or see what the tactic is here for white, and go ahead and do that. Okay, so already here, and I was pretty happy that I got to play this in the game, because I just watched this video. Knight takes f7, king takes, and queen takes, and the pawn's pinned. So we've won a pawn, we've displaced the black king, we're still ahead in development, and we have currently a threat on this pawn. So black has to do something about that, and but this was the game continuation. I pinned this knight. Probably better, I think, would have been bishop e3 just to keep this knight out of here, because clearly he wants to try to get rid of this bishop. But okay, I took this here, takes, I moved the queen because knight takes is coming, and I got to play this with check. This is actually, it's really bad. He probably should take him with the queen. Yeah, well, I don't know. This is not looking good. But anyway, this was basically a crush from here. Probably I could have already done better. There's several good moves here for white, but I just figured I'd put some pressure on some tender points. Already I could have taken this pawn, which I didn't see. But I just dropped the queen back, and I'm looking at this, and I was already thinking about playing the knight here. He actually forced me to play it. That's always nice when your opponent does that for you. And then he fell into a mate in one. So this was a really quick game, 20 moves, nice little miniature. But let's go back and look at how black should play here so that he doesn't fall into this tactic. So we see that c6 is a mistake. He has a couple different ideas here. Stockfish wants to play queen d4 with immediate complications. Ultimately, these are good complications for white, but you do have to kind of pay attention to what you're doing. So for example here, I think a lot of people would think about going immediately for this rook in the corner, but actually, because this knight is taken with check, and then let's say bishop back, for example, then we could get something like the bishop here attacking the queen. Knight takes, queen takes, hitting the queen. So queen takes, knight takes, and then the bishop pin here. Obviously, this f5 wouldn't work because of this d3 move, so the knight should probably just give itself up. Takes, maybe something like check, king over, and then c6. And, okay, so do we actually have even material here? We do. So I think the small advantage that the computer gives here to white is just due partially to the bishop pair, partially to pawn structure. And also because black's going to have to lose some time protecting this pawn so that he can then move the knight and then move the rook, and that's just actually going to take a few moves. That's pretty uncomfortable. In the meantime, white will probably just go ahead with like c3 and d4, get this bishop out of its annoying post, develop his bishop, develop his rook. So he's going to be up in development. He's got a weakness to attack, and he's got the bishop pair. So that would be totally fine. But white can do even a little bit better than this, actually, according to the computer. Although I think that that's probably because that's kind of a forcing line, and both sides will probably play those moves. I might go for that anyway, just because it's a little bit easier to remember. The other move here for white would be the bishop check, and he can't play c6 here because it's just going to get crushed with the fork here. Yeah, so anyway, there, obviously, that's not the way to block the check for black, is what I meant. So block with the knight. This knight is under attack, obviously, with check, so makes sense to take it. Obviously, the queen's not going to take here. The king can't take, so knight takes. And now you can take this because there's no knight here falling with check. Black can still play this check, of course. You know, maybe this, and the computer recommends just playing king f1. And then we get something like this where, yeah, this is a little complicated. In most of the lines that I was looking at, white ends up a couple pawns up. He usually ends up with an outside passer with the rook already behind it. And the combination of those two things is probably enough to just almost claim a win already in the endgame. But white's king is just misplaced. Black's queen is nicely centralized, so if he can withstand the pressure, white might have to be careful. The computer likes this nice little pawn sacrifice. If black were to take it, then bishop e3, and pieces are coming like really quickly, so black probably shouldn't accept it and just go back with the queen. But then different things here. Probably, I think the computer wanted to play knight e2, then the bishop with tempo there, and then continue attacking, continuing to put some pressure here and exploit pins and things of that nature. Black's going to have to play a couple of uncomfortable moves, maybe like f6 and some weird stuff so that he can somehow get his king safe while protecting his material. In the meantime, white's up a little bit of material himself. He's going to have an easier time getting his king safe because probably he's going to be able to play g3, king g2, and then move the rook out when he needs to. He would have to watch the light squares, but he still has a light square bishop, and at the moment he is not in danger of running into something there. So yeah, so this is a little more complicated. The more I look at it, maybe it's easier to go for that first line that I mentioned, where you just end up with some kind of clear things to play for with the bishop pair and the weakness in pawn structure there. With the immediate capture on b7, I'd probably think about that. Okay, so anyway, queen d4 is one way for black to play in this. The other thing is queen c8. This obviously keeps an eye on this pawn. And you might wonder, well, why can't white do the same thing here, just take? Because if king takes, then we still have the pin. Even though the queen's protecting, it's still pinned. The problem is that black doesn't have to take that piece immediately. He's got an intermezzo move, so if you take here, he's got bishop g4, and you're misplacing your queen, and then wherever your queen goes, then he's going to be able to take this piece, and this pawn is overprotected, and you're not really, like, it's hard to see if there's really any compensation here for being down a piece. I don't think there is. I forget what the evaluation was for the computer. It's a slight advantage to black, I think, but that's probably only based on some temporary things that maybe white can do to try to get some material back, but if he's not careful, then that advantage will grow a lot probably for black. So and the other point to remember too is that when you're taking here, if the queen were on d8, then it would be getting hit by this knight, so that would force an immediate decision, whereas that's not the case when the queen's on c8, obviously. So that's what allows that to have that intermezzo to be available. And in this case for white, probably what you should do, obviously not going for the blunder there, but you could play g4. There's a couple things. I mean, you could play for the check too, but I kind of like this idea because the bishop's going to retreat, and at some point you're going to be able to trade this knight for the bishop. So not only are you getting the bishop pair, but potentially you're going to get some kingside pawn advances in, and when you trade this knight for the bishop, you're also going to create a lever for your pawn pushes. So yeah, you get the bishop pair. Probably you're going to be able to castle long. You'll already have your pawn storm sort of in motion. So in case black castles over here, which probably is going to have to do at some point, because it's going to be hard to get his queen out of there because now of its position on c8. So yeah, probably what's going to happen is something like after the bishop comes out and maybe takes a look at this knight, trade that, move your d pawn, get your bishop out, castle long, and then continue with your pawn storm. I think that's probably what I would try to play for white. And obviously there's a lot of paths that could happen in the meantime there. But yeah, so that's a common trap there in the Scandinavian. Let's take a really quick last look at it. So the queen d8 line, knight develops, bishop develops. These are pretty common moves for black. Hitting this f7 point, probably you'll see e6, queen f3, and then setting up the trap for c6, which I think you will see quite a bit. Takes. There's no intermezzo here, obviously, because then you've got takes here. And yeah, among other things, probably you could probably start taking things. Actually, this would protect the pawn here. Something like this, probably no good, because after the bishop moves, you're going to be able to take here. That's probably not even the best line. It's just off the top of my head. So there's no intermezzo there, so you're going to be able to take here. Pawn's pinned. It's under attack. Whoops. It's under attack, and black has a hard time dealing with this. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and if you're playing against the Scandinavian as white, I think it's definitely something you might want to try for, because again, you're going to get some good development anyway, and most of the lines are pretty favorable for white. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you around.